Hello, my name is Jean and I am a knitter. I'm not a cold knitter, I'm a cozy warm knitter because I have been wrapped up in this shawl pretty much since I finished it. It's so much fun to wear. Absolutely, totally fun to wear. But this shawl was finished and I said I was going to knit hats using some of the excuse me. I'm knitting hats for people who need warm clothing in the wintertime and cannot afford to buy it out of the leftover Cascade 220 that I purchased when I was working on Master Hand Knitter Level 1. Long story short, I found a pattern, I saved it to Ravelry, projects, upcoming favorites, I don't even remember. Went to get the page, and it is not in a format that one can download and throw into Knit Companion. It's a web page. I didn't want to go through all the hassle of saving it as a PDF, taking a photo of it, all of that kind of stuff. I just put it up on one of my other little digital formats and started working. Well, that's all you get. It's written. I get so lost so quickly in those kinds of patterns. And I got out my pencil and graph paper and transferred it, or so I thought, to something that I could work with. You will notice that there's a font change, a color change here. That's because I didn't put that final cable in as I was writing it up. And then I just grabbed, this goes this way, I'll do it the same. Oops. No, it's supposed to cable in the other direction. If you look at this traveling cable pattern, you will see that in the middle, when you think it should be weaving, it doesn't. It's just kind of stripy. It shouldn't be just stripy, it should intersect. Oops, my bad. But once you've made a mistake like this, unless you want to do some major weird surgery and drop down and correct the cable crossing rows, which, no. No, you might as well just rip it out with a traveling cable, trust me on this. You just leave it. And I thought to myself as I was knitting, this is going to be a free hat for somebody. If they are going to decide not to take it because the cable pattern doesn't cross correctly in the middle, well, then they're allowed to have a cold head. Thank you very much, I'm just going to continue knitting and finish it and then start the next one and keep moving. I've got plenty more yarn where this came from. Now you will notice that I said the word traveling cable. This is a standard cable. It stays in its little straight path. These 6 stitches don't go anywhere except for up and over, up and over, up and over. This is what we call a traveling cable because these 3 stitches have gradually moved their way all the way over. Let's see. Yes. These 3 stitches have gradually moved their way up and over to the other side of the whole cable pattern. Can you see how it did that? The light's kind of doing weird things. It's right for my face, but not for right up here. So in order for those stitches to come up and move, every other row, or every single right side row, if you are working back and forth, those stitches have to move. Now, sometimes it's a full cable cross and they jump 3 stitches, but most of the time it's a traveling cable movement, and 1 stitch on that side moves over to this side, or 1 stitch on this side moves over to that side. Now, it's not really that that knit stitch is changing places. It's that the purl stitch, the background stitch, is moving behind it. So the stitches aren't moving actually, but you get 3 and then there's the background. There we go. That'll work. 3 stitches of the cable, 1 stitch of the background, and then it moves 1 over. Every other row, there's a cable happening. Somewhere on that row, some of those stitches are moving. It is never work even for 3 rows straight. Ever. Now, you will also notice that I have my cable needle tucked into my work, and that means I am not using my cable ring, which I adore. It's a cable needle that I wear on my finger as a ring. Why am I not using this super convenient thing that I will not drop, lose, have fall out of my work as I stuff it into the bag or throw it into a pocket or whatever I'm doing? It's too small. If you want your cable stitches to really look decent, you've got to use a cable needle that has a similar diameter to the needles you are actually knitting with. Ta-da! Similar. It can be a little bit bigger, it can be a little bit smaller, but it really shouldn't be drastically different. So, that's why I'm not using my cool jewelry, which I really like and find extremely convenient, on this donated hat. Now, I'm also going to say something else. I worked on the gauge for this hat, and my gauge was too loose, so I went down needle sizes, 2 needle sizes, not 2 millimeters. I apologize for that confusion. But, the hat is not large enough to fit an adult head. Well, it will fit an adult head, but if you wear it for an hour, you are going to have a headache from the tension pressing in. So this is a young adult or a child hat. I will say that head sizes don't really change drastically once you get through middle schoolish, maybe? I don't know. I don't remember, but I do remember knowing what my hat size was when I was 15, and I still wear the same size hat. I'm using my pirouette, which is no longer being made because Carrie closed her shop. And for this, I'm finding it useful. My one piece of advice would be, it's a hat. Don't worry about the gauge. It'll fit somebody. My other piece of advice, I have to admit, sorry, second piece of advice. When you when you think you forgot something and you are charting a pattern, don't assume you remember correctly. Go back to the original pattern and take a look. This is not a disaster. It's not a perfect win, but considering my goal is to use up my yarn, making something that will be functional for a person while not throwing away the yarn, I think I have a win. I also posted a picture of my stash on a Ravelry group that has a section called Flash Your Stash. At the beginning of the year, you take a photograph of your entire stash and you show it to people to say, this is my stash. Now, some people have multiple pictures of their multiple walls of shelves covered with many, 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 many yards of yarn. And they have a good reason for having that much stash. Some of these people work at making a living with what they create. Some of these people are weavers. Weavers go through massive amounts of yarn. Ask me how I know. And some of these people just curate a very, very select collection. I flashed my stash, I described it, and then I looked at something that was up in the upper left corner, which was some acrylic fuzzy stuff that I had been struggling with and knit and ripped and knit and ripped and knit and ripped, and it was not working and I couldn't find a pattern. And I said to myself, life is too short to work with yarn that you hate that won't do anything right. So it was pretty weedy looking because I'd ripped it so much. And I don't feel guilty. I threw it out. My husband looked at me and said, you could give that to our daughter-in-law because she's doing crochet and learning to knit. And I said, nobody deserves a gift that awful. That yarn does not behave well. And as a beginner to knitting, though she's quite an experienced and capable crocheter, there is no way I am going to have her knit with something that does not behave well, because as a beginner, you don't know if it is your technique or the materials you are using, and most of the time you assume it is your technique and you become discouraged. So I am not going to gift my daughter-in-law ill-mannered yarn. I like her far too much for that. Nobody deserves that. Oh my goodness. I can't tell how many times a beginner has made poor choices and has struggled with a yarn that's not going to do what it is they want it to do, and they assume it's because they're a beginner. Usually, folks, it's not because you're a beginner. It's because you have the wrong materials. Go to your local yarn shop. Go to an experienced knitter. Ask them for their honest opinion. And when they give it to you, pay attention. Set that expensive, gorgeous yarn aside for later and a different project, and use something that is more appropriate for your skill set so that you can learn and succeed. And then later, after you know what you're doing, tackle that expensive, fancy, weird stuff and make it jump through hoops and bow to your commands. Because it will, but you have to know what to command it to do. So that's my advice for today. The difference between a traveling cable, which is going places, and a standard cable, why you use a cable needle of a particular size, and, oh please, look at the directions before you assume you remembered them correctly when writing it down. My bad. Keep knitting, folks. Keep knitting. It'll all come out in the wash.